Hello everyone, welcome to this session on music business and mental health as part of the XpoNorth conference. Just to give you a little bit of a sort of an overview of what we're going to cover in the session. The aim for us is to focus on mental health in the music industry. We've got a really good panel of people who've got lots of expertise in this area. Look at the challenges, the available support and strategies that will help people work through difficult times. To consider the changing perspectives on mental health from across the music industry and explore common themes and run through the support that's available. And then hopefully we'll end on a discussion sort of looking ahead at the positive actions needed to help ensure that all those working in the music industry feel better able to manage and maintain their mental health. So I'm going to start with some intros, but I'll just give you a brief intro from myself. So my name is Joe Hastings. I'm the head of Music Minds Matter at Help Musicians. And for those of you who don't know who Help Musicians are, we're an independent UK charity for professional musicians of all genres. We help at times of crisis, but also at times of opportunity, and we give people the extra support they need at crucial stages of their careers that could make or break their careers. And Music Minds Matter is the mental health support service for all those working in music across the UK. It's run by Help Musicians and it offers direct and confidential support, information and resources to those experiencing difficulties or wishing to find out more. And some of the examples of the support you can access through Music Minds Matter. So we have a 24/7 support line for anyone struggling to cope or seeking direct help. And callers will be put through to trained counsellors who are available to take calls and offer confidential advice at any time. So you can call Music Minds Matter and we'll include the number so anyone who wants to use the service can. And what you get from that service is a listening ear, advice and potential referral for further support in the event that therapy may be needed. So it's quite a robust service. And then the other elements of Music Minds Matter, we have an explore information and resource structure online. So it's a website offering resources on managing your mental health. It offers signposting to local and national support services and video content from mental health experts and others in the industry. And if you visit the site, you've got the ability to search and explore information that hopefully meets your needs and to hear from others who've experienced similar issues, including video from mental health experts and people working in the industry. And you can also access and join online and peer-to-peer support sessions. So these are free, regular online support sessions, and they allow anyone wishing to learn more about managing mental health and wellbeing to get involved. So they range from sessions to help with the development of strategies to better manage challenging times, to the peer support groups, which provide anyone attending the chance to be listened to in a space of peers who understand the issues that you may be facing. And all of these sessions are facilitated by accredited counsellors. Again, you can find out more by going to musicmindsmatter.org.uk. So that's enough from me. I'm going to ask for a bit of an intro from the panelists. And there's two questions that I wanted to pick up on here. So firstly, who they are and what they do. And then secondly, just a question around why the panelists think that the subject of mental health in music right now is so important. So we'll start with Hannah.
Hi, so my name is Hannah Brinley and I'm a learning and development specialist working for Music Support. Music Support is a charity very similar in lots of ways to Help Musicians. We're here to promote and support mental health within the music and live events industry. So we also have a helpline similar to Help Musicians in that the helpline is there for anybody in music and live events who wants a listening ear. Everybody at the end of the phone is trained and everybody at the end of the phone has worked in music and live events. So they all understand the kind of unique challenges that we face working in this industry. So they are there to listen, to support, and also to signpost to other services depending on what the needs of the caller is. We also have a big festival presence, so we provide festival safe hubs. So we are backstage at festivals. We're there for you guys, really, for people who are working at festivals. It's a quiet, safe confidential space for anyone to come and take a breather, again, speak to somebody if you've got something going on that you want to share and get support around, and also really just to talk about mental health. A lot of the work that we do is about fighting the stigma, really, that there is around mental health, and talking about it is a big part of that. The other thing that we do, which is really my part to play, is we do a lot of learning and development. So we do courses that are aimed at promoting good mental health in this industry, in particular mental health first aid, which I'll talk about a little bit more shortly, and addiction and recovery, again, which I'll talk about a little bit more as we go through the session. And then in terms of why I think mental health is so important in this industry at this time, well, the first thing to say is mental health is my kind of thing. So for me, it's always important. But obviously in this industry at the moment, times have been tough. Times were tough through COVID. People were really struggling to find work. So a lot of the people that I was working with, it was very, very quiet for. People were moving into other careers, doing other things. And now, of course, it's exactly the opposite. You know, it's what everyone's waiting for. Everyone's busy, but now it's the other side of the coin. People are really busy. They're not taking enough time for themselves. They're not doing self-care, and so a lot of people are stretched and struggling. So yeah, that would be my take on it. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Hannah. And Rod.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Rod Jones. I'm multifaceted in the music industry. I formed the band Idlewild 27 years ago, which we're still going miraculously. I'm a producer and also a artist management company as well, and have been working with the Scottish Mental Health Foundation and the Scottish Mental Health Arts and Film Festival on and off for the last 10 years. Forming Fruit Tree Foundation with Emma Pollock, which was about raising awareness of mental health and well-being in the music industry and in Scotland primarily to start with, where we made a record to raise awareness involving 10 Scottish artists, from members of Frightened Rabbit to Twilight Sad, James Yorkston, Jill O'Sullivan, to name a few. And we then started to run some workshops based around songwriting and mental health, trying to use songwriting as a form of conversation, and allowing people who maybe found it difficult to communicate what they were thinking and feeling, doing that through song, which was really surprisingly successful. And since then, we've been, really just on making appearances here and there on various panels and advisory capacities, talking about mental health and its impact on everyone, but specifically musicians, and talking about what a kind of, I suppose, as a touring musician, a sort of almost bipolar existence that is, in a way, in that there are serious highs and lows on an almost daily basis, from being on a stage to, in front of a bunch of adoring fans, to then suddenly being in a hotel room on your own, repacking your suitcase for the 50th time that week, or suffering from a hangover or whatever it is. It's a very isolating existence sometimes, quite difficult to talk to people about, obviously, and also the kind of reverse stigma, I suppose, of when you are a musician and people assume that you must be having a great time. You're being paid to do what you love and play concerts and tour around the world. That there's almost a reluctance of musicians to outwardly complain or say that they're feeling down, because they assume people are going to think, well, you lead a pretty privileged life. So there is sometimes the stigma reducing is about reducing the stigma for people in that industry, to say it's okay. It doesn't matter how good your job is or how much you enjoy doing your job, you're still as likely, if not sometimes more likely, to suffer from mental health illness. So, and yeah, as of right now, coming out of a period of stress and inactivity and financial worries for a lot of musicians, it's been very one-sided, I suppose. It hasn't been the ups and downs. It's been a lot of downs, followed by lots of opportunities very, very quickly, and possibly overworking. As Hannah said, I think it's a very one extreme to the other, which is obviously not great for your mental health. It's not great for anything really. So yeah, it's a period of massive change from one end of the spectrum to the other. A time when people were feeling pretty unsupported, I know, by government, certainly in the music industry, to now all of a sudden all these opportunities are here. You've got to snatch them all now in case they go away again. So yeah, it's a very confusing time to work in this industry, I think, for a lot of people. And yeah, a huge uncertainty over the last few years, which is never great for your mental health. So as Hannah said, though, it's something that goes hand in hand, and the music industry as a whole music is very difficult. It can be seen as a great tool for mental health well-being when you're not a musician as a professional. When you are a professional musician, obviously it's linked massively to stress and your livelihood. And you know, as I said, first thing I say to musicians when we talk about resilience and building up some resilience for mental health is to get yourself another creative hobby, because the one that you currently have is now linked to your mental health problems probably. So yeah, it's in current times it's obviously more prevalent than it ever has been.
Thanks, Rod. Some really good points in there. Maria.
Hi, yes, I'm Maria. I'm an independent artist manager based in the southwest of the UK. I currently manage 4 artists. So Sinead O'Brien, she's an Irish poet based in London. We've got an album out on Friday, so that's all very busy, super exciting. We've got a band called Grandma's House, a punk band from Bristol, female 3-piece. They're incredible. Keaton Decker, an alt pop artist, and then just started managing Blossom Calderoni, along with a fellow colleague of mine, Paige, as well. So that's my first co-management endeavour. I like to have a particular focus on supporting women in the music industry in particular, and non-binary folk. I think it's super important that everyone supports, you know, minorities as much as possible. And me being a woman in the industry, I found it quite difficult at first, you know, trying to find my way as a young female manager. So trying to support those artists is really important to me as well, and build a bit of an ethos around it. So I launched my business this year called Sakura Artists, and that's my management business and my own roster. And I worked with Saffron Records in Bristol on that over the last year. So that was during the second half of the pandemic as such. So last year in 2021, I received a grant from them to be able to develop this, and working with a mentor over that year to help build that business model and design the website, and work with another female agency called Konnichiwa in Bristol, who work on marketing and web design. So that was a really great experience. And I don't know if you're familiar with Saffron already, but they are supporting, again, women, non-binary folk in the music industry. They have incredible courses, so like DJing, you know, looking into tech production in the music industry. So it's amazing how much they've grown over the past few years. And I think that organization has been so important for me to develop my own business. And also, yeah, the mentoring that they provided through their scheme was super important to me during that whole COVID pandemic side of things, just to have someone to talk to, a bit of a sounding board in that whole business development. And yeah, I found that mentoring side really helpful in terms of mental health as well as business development, because it's just really great to have someone to be able to talk to about everything that's happening. And then, yeah, this year I'm part of the accelerator program through the MMF, who will also provide mentoring to us. And we have like regular courses every week with different music industry personnel. So yeah, it's a busy time right now, especially for management. And as Rod and Hannah were saying, like, it went from nothing to everything, and it's a bit non-stop, really, I have to say. And a lot of people are agreeing. And being on this accelerator scheme, you realize you're not on your own, because being an independent manager, the challenges you face with that are like, you know, you're working with with four walls around you every day and on Zooms and all that side of things. So it's really good to have a sounding board and people to talk to through that. And I think, yeah, mental health in the music industry has been something really important. And yeah, for me, personally, I've just seen it affect so many different people throughout my time working in music and management, from managers to musicians as well, and to other industry personnel, especially on the live side, like Hannah was mentioning, them not having jobs, having to go to other careers last year. It just fluctuated so much that obviously had a big impact on people's mental health. And then, yeah, last year the MMF offered me a place on the mental health first aid course that Hannah was running through music support, and it was absolutely incredible, actually. And we were a few other managers on that course, and it was great to just find out more about how to deal with all these different situations that you could face, especially as a manager. So you can detect the early signs of anxiety, depression, especially with the musicians you work with or other colleagues as well in the industry. So that, you know, helped me in terms of my own knowledge personally, and I felt that was really important to tell more people about it. And I think that's why participating in this panel was really important to me, just to be able to, you know, spread that awareness, and that there are those opportunities to be able to become more aware and supportive, you know, of others' mental health as well. So yeah, it's that stigma again, you know, making sure people talk about it and aren't worried, you know, to come forward to explain that they are suffering with these issues, because there is support out there. And yeah, that's what I think in terms of like spreading that word and of importance, really.
Thanks, Maria. That's, yeah, all really, really helpful and useful. And actually, I was just going to expand on that a little bit before we move on to some questions for the panel. Just to give a little bit of an overview of what we've seen through the kind of current climate, because some of you will know we've been offering hardship support throughout the pandemic, and what we've been able to do at regular intervals during the various periods is ensure that we're asking people what they're experiencing, what their challenges are, and what their needs are. And it's given us a really good insight, and actually, you know, a sort of troubling insight in some ways into where things have been for people, and actually echoes a lot of what's already been said by panel members. But and so apologies if some of this is repeating, but just to give a little bit of an overview of the kind of current climate as we've seen through the people that we've been supporting. For those seeking therapeutic support, anxiety and depression are the most common issues that people are presenting with, and that's something that's remained unchanged since before the pandemic. It was most commonly what people were presenting with around their mental health prior to the pandemic. We are seeing much larger numbers of people applying for support currently as opposed to previously. But also through the online sessions that we've been running, the peer support groups and the self-care sessions, we've also seen an increase in people experiencing low mood and negative thoughts. So maybe lower level, less kind of clinically significant issues, but actually no less debilitating and no less challenging. So that's something that we've been seeing through the Music Matters service over the last 18 months or so. But we've also seen a higher number of people working in the industry experiencing stress and burnout, and also physical health issues that are impacting on mental health as well. I think a lot of those things kind of co-combine and become kind of issues that need addressing across different sort of potential needs. So if someone has a physical health issue that's impacting on their mental health or vice versa, it's how we and how others that we work with are able to ensure that someone is getting the right support as and when they need it. And that may be that they need two different clinical professionals to support them there. But also stress and burnout, as in particular Rod and Maria mentioned, are key issues for people right now. And we've seen much higher numbers of people attending the self-care sessions on stress and burnout than we'd seen previously. So it's clearly having an impact, this period of things opening up again for people, and the potential pressures that people are putting on themselves and that others are putting on them to try and kind of build back careers after the pandemic. The other thing just to acknowledge is that every case is different. So, whilst work's returning to the sector, and that's very welcome, a lot of the people that we are engaging with are compensating for the past 2 years by taking on more than they can healthily manage, and we've heard people say this directly to us. So we've got it in surveys, but we've also seen in the self-care sessions people be quite open about the fact that they acknowledge that they're overstretching, that they're trying to do as much as they can, and this is having an impact on people's physical and mental health as well. So they may be contributing factors to the kind of stress and burnout that people are experiencing alongside other mental health conditions. And in a survey we did last year, 87% of musicians that said that their mental health had deteriorated during lockdown. We've definitely seen this through the surveys, actually more widely within the music industry. The feelings of instability and reduced confidence and fear for the future, have taken their toll, and they'll take time to heal for people as they try and rebuild their careers. But the numbers of people who are using our services have grown year on year by more than 30%. So we know that the last 2 years have been really difficult, and we're seeing it as a trend through the support we're offering. So those kind of opportunities as they come back up, people are finding it challenging to manage their mental health, and from those with therapeutic needs surrounding depression, anxiety, through to others who are benefiting from support and resources that are available for people to try and maintain their mental health. The full spectrum of kind of experiences are particularly challenging there. I was going to start, Rod, if it's okay to come back to you. I know you picked up on some of this in your first response in your intro, but given the insights that I've just mentioned and we've just talked about, what have you personally, or through those that you work with, what have you seen as the biggest challenges in returning to work for people?
I think, as you've just touched upon, the main one has been people taking on too much, or not maybe being used to taking on quite so much, having had 2 fairly quiet years, albeit very stressful ones. I think that there is a tendency, yes, to grab the opportunities where you can in the music industries, especially, I'm sure Maria will agree, in management. There is very little downtime, if any, and you suddenly find yourself in a position where your roster is growing probably faster than it should, because there are opportunities out there, and those bands are suddenly getting busier and busier because they're desperate to take all the opportunities that they can coming out of it. So yeah, the workload is definitely one of the big ones. I mean, it's looking at a lot of bands coming out of lockdown having had to take on part-time jobs or full-time jobs as well, who are trying to extricate themselves from that slowly, but are obviously worried about doing so because they were left in such a hole during lockdown. The workload they have of being, we need to, you're saying, oh, we need an artwork for next week, or we need this finished for so and so, and we're going on tour in 3 weeks' time, and they've also got a day job which they're running with as well. It's a lot to juggle, just physically, let alone mentally. So stress levels are definitely going through the roof. And I mean, I think that's the case in and outside of the music industry, to be honest. I think there's a tsunami of mental health that hit during the pandemic. But yeah, stress and anxiety are definitely the biggest two that I'm noticing more now coming out of the pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, as you say, depression and anxiety have been prevalent in the music industry for a long time. One caveat, I think, that it's sometimes important to look at things in not always a doom and gloom approach, is that actually part of the figures coming up the way as they are of people talking about anxiety and depression is the fact that people are learning to talk about it, and also the services are there for people to do that. So people are becoming more aware, stigma is reducing. I think we're exiting a 2-year period where actually probably for the first time musicians were feeling, okay, I don't feel bad about saying I'm having a bad time here, because it's been fairly widely publicized that they were amongst the hardest hit. So there is a positive side to it, which is that people, yes, although more are being reported, it's probably that there's not completely to do with there being more cases, just more actually coming forward and talking about it, which is a positive. It's great. And there are more services out there like yourselves, which are offering support, and some non-music specific ones as well. You know, people like Breathing Space and various others that have always been there as well. So I think for musicians specifically, yeah, it's that shock to the system of getting back to things. It's suddenly become overwhelmingly busy from basically doing nothing. Well, a lot of people be doing nothing for 2 years, or except for stressing about money or filling out funding applications. You know, so again, one positive that's come out of it is that people are now much better at filling out funding applications. So I'm seeing much more bands coming through with funding to make a record all of a sudden because they've got really good at filling out forms. But it's really it's been a turbulent time, and coming out of that, the positivity that's been able to go on tour again, been able to mix with people again, and all of these things, it's without the stress involved in it, it is a huge positive for people, and there's a lot of adrenaline that goes with that, and there's a lot of potentially over drinking and over partying and over making up for lost time. So, you know, any kind of extremes aren't particularly great for mental health, as I'm sure we all know. So it is, yeah, going from one to the other can be, and going from not really seeing anybody other than on the other end of a screen to suddenly being in a room full of, I mean, I noticed it going to, you know, South by or to the Great Escape, you're suddenly in a room full of 200 or more people, lots of whom you haven't seen for a long time, and you're not really sure how to interact with them. You're not sure whether you're going to hug them or elbow bump them or sort of recoil. So it's weird. We're becoming used to being social again as well. It's a whole minefield of emotions to deal with all at once. While you're away from home a lot, and you know, if you're a touring musician as well, it's a lot for your brain to cope with.
Maria, from your perspective as a manager, are there things that I'm sure there are lots of things that you recognise in what Rod said, but I guess the two questions in a way. What has the experience of being a music manager been, and the impact of the pandemic on managers, but also on the musicians and the people that you manage and engage with? You know, what have you seen there as well? Is there anything else that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I think, yeah, in terms of management, it's been so, it's literally fluctuated that whole time. You know, a lot of management companies at the start of the pandemic made a lot of cuts. I was working for a company personally at the time. And yeah, a few of us lost our jobs. It was happening all throughout the sector because obviously management, a lot of the commission and income comes from the live side, and the forecasted income just didn't look, you know, stable enough for companies to be able to have their employees. So a few did have to make cuts, and unfortunately, you know, a few of us were let go, and that was really, really hard, you know. And I think I speak for a lot of managers all around that were in that position. It was really hard mentally, to be honest, like in terms of what does one do next? Does one get a normal job? Do we carry on? You know, there's just so many different questions. And I think it was really hard to find that advice because you're totally, you know, on your own as such, because we couldn't even socialize. We were stuck indoors. So that was definitely a hard, you know, had a negative impact on a lot of people's mental health. And, you know, for me personally, I took it as something like as a challenge and something that I wanted to build up on and start managing my own roster rather than, you know, working for a company, because I just didn't see that as attainable during those 2 years. So I managed to, you know, build my own business. And like Rod was saying, you know, applying for grant applications and funding. Yeah, I became quite you know, a pro at those in the end, that, you know, managed to get the Saffron grant and got a couple of other like local funds. But a few of us weren't eligible for like the government schemes, you know, self-employment. We'd only been self-employed for just under the amount of time that mean that you were eligible. So of course that was a really difficult time. So financial instability, I think, all around in terms of management was a big had a big impact on people's mental health and anxiety. And I know a lot of tour managers as well that had to just take jobs in supermarkets, delivery drivers, things like that, because there just weren't those opportunities there. And I took on a job at an app for a bit, just to keep some money flowing through, but actually balancing that with my management was really difficult, and then also created a lot of anxiety and burnout because I was just doing too much. So it was, how did you find that balance? And those 2 years were really difficult, I think, for a lot of managers, but there's a lot to be said in terms of support around like independent managers. I've made quite a good network personally, and we're very open in terms of talking about how things are going, our feelings. And over those 2 years, we do regular Zooms, some of us, and things like that. So that was really like a positive to come out of it. I felt like I built a lot of relationships with individual managers over that time who I hadn't met actually in person before. So that was really nice to be able to connect over Zoom and things like that. And in terms of musicians as well, like I felt in terms of releases, things were just going at a high speed in terms of like release strategies, because everything was just like, that was the only thing we could do. So we just had to keep releasing music, building that profile. So there was a lot of demand on musicians as well to be able to create content, create music videos. But how do you do that in the pandemic and finding all these different ways? So, it was a moment of change for a lot of people. But I found that like with my artists who I work with, they really made it work. And it was quite inspiring to see that in terms of, they were taking up, every offer, challenge that was in their way, but building on that. So, I took on Grandma's House during the pandemic, and we signed a singles deal like 1 month in from working with them, but that was all on Zoom. And it was quite interesting how we did everything online really, but actually managed to do a whole campaign without meeting the people involved in the campaign, and doing live shows around it as well, which is a big part. So there was a lot of strategy there, but now coming out of it and playing shows again, it's absolutely crazy really for musicians, to be, that's what is great about it, being on the road, but at the same time they had all this time to be able to plan, to write music, to go in the studio. And now that they're on the road again, that balance is completely off. So it's like, how do you adjust back to those pre-pandemic times? Or are we just at double the speed that we were at beforehand, because we're trying to fit everything in that we couldn't do over the last 2 years? So it's trying to find that balance. And I think it's going to take a lot of time actually to get back to that stable state that we were all in. It wasn't as stable, but it was more stable than we are now. So there's a lot of thinking and still challenges to face here, I think, especially in terms of like supporting those musicians and other industry personnel as well. So yeah, it's been a time of ups and downs, but I feel there is positivity that did come out of it, like Rod was saying as well. But yeah, there's still a lot to look forward to as well, whether who knows what could happen. I mean, it's very unstable still, but I feel there's a pace right now that is quite unmanageable for a lot of people, and something needs to be adjusted to help everyone and everything.
Thanks, Maria. Hannah, I was just going to maybe move on to talk about the fact that there are those challenges, thinking about what everyone's seen as good examples of help and support that's been available for people in the music profession, and more widely actually, to promote people's mental health. And I just wanted to pick up on that and maybe ask you to talk in particular about the addiction and recovery and the mental health first aid training that music support offer.
Yeah, so I'll talk about mental health first aid first. So mental health first aid, which is the course that Maria did with me just before Christmas, I think.
Yes, September time last year.
Yeah. So it's a course that we run online most of the time. We do it face-to-face if people would prefer that, but usually that would be an organisation that would book us in specifically to do a face-to-face sessions. But so we run 4 3-hour sessions, so usually over 2 weeks. They're online, and the idea with mental health first aid is that it's really very similar to physical health first aid. but not enough people are doing it. So, you know, if you go into a room full of people and ask people to put their hands up if they've done physical health first aid, you know, 3/4 of the room will put their hands up. Yeah, physical health first aid, done that, if not once, twice. If you ask the same thing about mental health first aid, maybe 1 or 2, if you're lucky, will put their hands up. It's getting more and more, and we are absolutely not the only people that run this course. You know, this isn't a UK run course. The difference with the one that is run by us is that the people attending the course are all in music and live events. So there have been a few sort of adjustments to the course as well that we've made because of that. So it's really about how to support people's mental health instead of how to support their physical health. The other interesting thing about it, of course, is that if you speak to somebody who has done both courses, mental health first aid and physical health first aid, and you ask them which one they have used more often, it will always be the mental health first aid, because mental health is everywhere. It's very rare that I speak to somebody and tell them what I do, that they don't kind of go quiet and then go, oh, that's really interesting, because I'm a bit worried about my brother or my sister or my mum or my friend or my colleague. Do you know what I mean? Almost everybody, if not themselves, which is, you know, almost all of us have experienced some kind of mental ill health at some point in our life. If not themselves, then somebody that they love or they work with or they care about needs that support. It's everywhere. It's a human thing in exactly the same way as physical ill health is a human thing. And so the course is really about that. So a big part of it is the destigmatization that we've all been talking about, that one of the sad things about all this is that people don't feel able to talk when they've got a mental health problem. We're happy to tell somebody that we've got a problem with our arm or our leg or whatever. If it's our mental health, we find it a lot harder. So that's the first side of it, is really getting people to talk. And, you know, I love hearing people after the course telling me that they were talking to their friend or their colleague about it, and sort of talking to them about, you know, the statistics, which are really interesting, and, you know, just generally sharing the stuff that they have learned on the course to try and encourage everybody to talk about this more. You know, I'm thrilled that we're all sitting here now and that this is part of XpoNorth, because, you know, that wouldn't have been the case a few years ago, and it's just completely brilliant. And, you know, what you were saying, Rod, earlier about one of the few good things about this time is that actually one of the reasons why we're getting more people accessing support services and we're hearing more about this stuff is that people are becoming more open about it, which is just a wonderful thing. And one of the few good things really that came out of COVID is that everybody is talking more about mental health, which is just great. So we talk a lot about that side of things, and about how we can all work together to destigmatize mental health. And then the next part of it is really just about recognizing symptoms of ill health. So like Maria was saying, recognizing when somebody might be struggling and then knowing what to do about it. Because again, if somebody had a bad arm or a bad leg, you know, you saw someone in the street bleeding, you would rush over and help them. Oh, you know, what can I do? How can I help you? If we see somebody that we know or don't know, anybody really who we're concerned about and we think they might be going through something, very often the reaction is, I'll leave it, hope it sort of goes away. You know, I don't know what to say and I don't want to make it worse, so I just won't say anything at all. And so we talk about how to approach somebody, how to support them, what you can say and what you can do, which is actually really simple stuff. You know, it's not rocket science. It's pretty easy, and quite often it's a tweak to what you would have done already. So we talk about listening skills and how you can use them. We talk about signposting. So what we are doing on this course is not getting people to be counsellors or psychologists. You won't leave it, being somebody's sole source of support. What you're doing is exactly the same as with physical health first aid. So you know how to approach somebody that you're concerned about, how to support them in that moment until they can get professional help or other support. So it might be that through doing the course, you know about a charity that you think will be really, really helpful. So you signpost them to that charity. Or it might be that you're talking to them and you talk to them about other supportive people, and together you decide to contact their manager or their parent or their partner or whatever. So thinking about other forms of support, it's not about you then, speaking to somebody for hours and hours every day and sort of carrying them through life. It's about you being there in a crisis, knowing how to support them in a crisis, absolutely checking in on them, but more getting them to a place where they're accessing other supports. So yeah, so and then I suppose the other part of the course which people often don't think about, and I suppose this is a bit where it is very different from physical health first aid, is that we talk a lot about our own well-being, so what we can do to support ourselves. So that's a big part of the course as well that people often say they weren't really expecting, and quite often they'll say at the end that they're really sad the course is over and that they feel like they've sort of been through some kind of therapy. You know, it's a little bit like group therapy. So we talk a lot about how yeah, things that we can do, small changes that we can make to make ourselves more resilient. Yeah, just lifestyle changes, I suppose, but also using the rest of the group as support. You know, groups stay in contact afterwards. It's quite a special time for a lot of people. So often people feel like they've really forged relationships whilst they're doing that course, and so they can carry on and support one another after the course as well. So yeah, so that's mental health first aid. And then we also do addiction and recovery. So addiction and recovery came about, we were delivering mental health first aid. We touch on a lot in there. So lots of different mental health conditions are covered, so people understand them more. We cover addiction, but not in the kind of detail that people wanted. We often find, and I was thinking when we were talking about COVID and lockdown and everything else, I was thinking about coping strategies and how lockdown was a funny period, and some people were able to really put coping strategies in places. You know, lots of people started, I don't know, jogging or picked up new hobbies or learned a musical instrument or whatever, which was great. And lots of people have managed to carry that on. Lots of people sadly haven't, as things got busier. But then on the flip side, that a lot of people also found that the coping strategies they were using were coping strategies that were really unhelpful. I'm talking about drink and drugs. For a lot of people, lockdown really exacerbated problems that they already had. And so that course is a half-day session, really thinking again about how to support somebody that you're concerned about. So if you're worried that somebody is drinking a bit too much, using drugs too much, and it's impacting their life, how to support them. So we've had people coming on the course who want to support others, and it might be colleagues, bandmates, whatever. Some people come on who might be concerned about their own, drinking or drug taking, and have found it really useful to kind of look at that and think about what they want to do to change that. And also people in recovery as well. So people who are in recovery themselves, they've had problems in the past, they might now be completely abstinent or very rarely use drugs and alcohol, and want to put their experiences into helping and supporting others, and doing that course has really helped them to kind of cement together everything they know so that again they can support people.
Thanks, Hannah. That's a really amazing overview. And just to say, we're going to make sure that information and links are shared with everyone so that they can access and look at what's available through Music Support and through Help Musicians and through others. Maria and Rod, is there anything that you wanted to pick up on in terms of what you've seen to work and what you've seen has been helping people through this kind of period as we transition back into hopefully something new?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are generally, as I said earlier, are beginning to make use of services a lot more, but they're also beginning to talk more openly about it. And I think, you know, I'm seeing dialogue with bands we manage, with those musicians being able to talk more openly about stress levels and anxiety levels, much more openly, in front of each other and with us personally. And I think, looking at, back to people I've been working with for years who, I've always been I've been quite vocal and open about the fact that I'd had depression years, over the years, not badly for a long time, thankfully, due to therapy and various other things which have helped, predominantly actually working with a mental health charity, which was probably the most, I suppose, touching what Hannah said, was one of doing a course sometimes, or working with other people in that field, actually gives you much more of a sense that you are not on your own in that environment. So actually, yeah, people starting to talk a lot more about this, and mental health being at the forefront of conversations at a lot of these showcase festivals and a lot of these things that people are going to now, is making musicians start to talk to each other about it more. There is much more engagement with it, which is great. When I first talked about this about 10 years ago, I think in something like the Edinburgh Evening News, And all of a sudden, all of my friends were coming up to me for weeks afterwards, asking if I was okay, and and then talking to me about their experiences as well, which hadn't happened before, and we were unaware of each other's struggle or whatever it was. So I think now, because that dialogue is so much more open and people are talking about it in interviews, interviews with us, a long-standing joke in the band are like free therapy a little bit. You write music from the self, and then you basically go and do an interview and figure out what it's actually that you've written about, because more often than not, you don't really understand it until you start to talk about it afterwards. So it's sort of free therapy in a way. And so I suppose now people are able to have those conversations purely around mental health, and are talking about that in their press interviews and with each other and at festivals. And that reopening, I suppose, and people being able to have physical contact again and see other people again, people are opening up much more, which is great. And as you say, the worry is that although there are more people talking about it, there are more people experiencing it at the same time. So it's you have to hope that will balance, and that's the word that I know you used earlier, Maria, which I think is the really important one, is balance. It's like having a balance of every job in the world, especially this one. There's going to be ambition involved in it, and taking opportunities where they come, and wanting to strive to do things while you can, but it's having a balance of that with whether it's downtime, whether it's another hobby that's creative. Creative hobbies are great for the brain. They're really good for mental health. They engage the correct part of the brain in stopping you feel stress and the fight or flight reflex. So it's really, I think actually I remember sitting with you, Joe, on a panel where we were being taught about the fight or flight reflex in the brain, and how to engage that creative part of the brain to try and neutralize that, essentially, to bring back some sort of reason and cognitive thinking. So yeah, having a creative hobby that isn't linked with your day job, so to speak. So when you're a musician, that okay, it can't be music anymore, I'm afraid. Take up painting or weaving or something, tapestry, I don't know, whatever it is really, really key. And I think, as you say, exercise is great as well. People have taken up running and whatever other things, and that is a great thing for mental health. But again, it does have ups and downs. It does have endorphins, and it does have adrenaline involved. So having something that's cognitive, that's creative as a hobby is a really, really important thing to do, I think.
Thanks, Rod. And Maria, anything that you wanted to feed in there?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Rod's been saying, really. I think about finding that balance, like I've mentioned previously. I think as managers, for example, we were switched on all the time during lockdown because we had access to the internet. We were indoors all the time. So there was an expectation that you could reply because you didn't have anything else to do. And I think it's like coming out of that. How do we find that balance again where, people understand that there are other things going on? We have to take care of ourselves. I have to admit, personally, I find that really hard. And what Hannah was saying during the mental health first aid course, she'd be like, oh, do something for yourselves tonight, and then we'll report back on this. And because you had that task to do, you do it. And it was great to hear what everyone did, whether that was a nice dinner or, do some painting, read a good book. So it's just, trying to get into that mindset. And I do need to personally do that again. It's reminded me. But for everyone, whether you're a musician, you're, touring or playing, it's good to have something completely, separate to that, music-based career. To be honest, I wouldn't be in the industry if I didn't love music, but playing music is something that I really like doing as well. So, in lockdown, I picked up an instrument and I still play it when I want some downtime, which is super nice. So it's just, finding that, it's all about that balance, and then talking as well. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. People are experiencing the same things as you in the industry. You're not on your own. And also those helplines, they've been super supportive. I used music support maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a couple of times, and it was just great to have the sounding boards to talk about things, how you're feeling, and explore that a bit further. You can get sometimes an assessment through BAPAM. I got one once, which was really interesting. And they're They help analyze, what is actually going on in terms of, whether it's anxiety, depression, and do a full assessment for you to take to a therapist if you really need it. So the facilities there are incredible, and I urge anyone to pick up the phone if you need to and talk to someone, or find someone that you can talk to, whether it's a friend or someone else in the industry that you're close to. I think it's all about talking and finding that advice and sounding board.
Thanks, Maria. I should just mention BAPAM, because I realised that I should have done that at the beginning. BAPAM are our clinical partner for the Music Minds Matter service, so they have a really large range of therapy and therapeutic practitioners available to engage with the people working in the industry, and those therapists almost exclusively work with people in the industry, so they're an amazing resource, and who you end up speaking to potentially around whatever you're experiencing will definitely have a knowledge and understanding of what you're experiencing, and also the wider industry and how those things potentially connect. So they're a really, really useful organisation, and we'll try and make sure that you've got links to that as well. Just moving on to the final question, it was really just to ask everyone if they, and feel free to just jump in, but if you want to share any kind of insights on what more you feel is required to ensure that everyone working in the sector feels supported and able to develop and maintain positive mental health. So what do you think needs to happen now? There's a lot of good work that is happening, and we've talked about building support networks, trying to find things that are healthy and positive in terms of promoting your mental health, looking at coping strategies, but just on a kind of more fundamental level, what do you think needs to change, or what do you think is required potentially to enable everyone to feel supported in this industry?
Personally,
I'll throw it open.
Personally, I think straight away that, and this is not just the music industry, but I think we need to have something in place in the way that you do for physical illness, where people who are diagnosed or people who do have a problem, and as you were talking about earlier, getting to the root of what that problem is, to not be afraid to actually press pause or stop for a while, because when you're in the music industry, that's very, very difficult to do. It's terrifying to do, actually, because you think, I'm going to miss this opportunity, it's not going to be here when I come back, and also how am I going to support myself while I do press pause or stop. And there obviously are funds like yourselves and help musicians and various others that can help with that, but there needs to be a more kind of industry-wide and national level or international level, really, a support network for that, in the way that there is for, if someone has an accident and they can't work, there is support available for that person. That needs to be the same for mental health, and there is to an extent, but it's very, very difficult to access. And I think that there needs to be a bigger framework and structure in place for that, to the point where people genuinely don't feel that extra level of fear and stress and anxiety about pressing pause on top of the fear and anxiety they're already feeling when they've been diagnosed with that. I think that is a sort of a cycle that is things just get worse and worse and worse, because you're aware of what's wrong, but can you do anything about it? That needs to be put in place, I think.
Such a good point. Maria, Hannah, anything you wanted to
Well, I'll just come in, because what I have to say is very much related to what you said, Rod, which is really going back to the mental health first aid course. I want to see a future in this industry where every gig, every studio, every tour has a mental health first aider in exactly the same way as everyone has a physical health first aider. We're starting to see that. Some really kind of forward thinking people are starting to make that a prerequisite of a tour or a gig or a festival, but it's absolutely not the case everywhere, and it would make a massive difference if it was the case. This industry loses so many incredible, talented, amazing people every year because of mental health conditions that could easily have been supported, stopped in their tracks a lot earlier, and they could still be here and doing what they love and what they're amazing at now. And unfortunately, they're not. You know, they've moved on because of the stresses and strains, which are stresses and strains, and they are absolutely there in this industry, but they are surmountable if people have the support that they need. And unfortunately, they don't at the moment. So yeah, that's my dream: an army of mental health first aiders everywhere in the music industry, in the same way as we have physical health first aiders there too.
Thanks, Hannah. Maria, anything you wanted to feed in?
Yeah, I think yeah, echoing what Rod was saying earlier, I think, you know, the access to these services is fantastic in the music industry, but yeah, it just needs to be a bit more in terms of nationalization of it, in terms of, you know, the NHS is great that we have that service, but there is a certain level to it. And, you know, if you do have mental health issues, or, you know, you need support, there doesn't really seem to be a track where you can go down, as opposed to, you know, like a hospital bed for a physical issue. So yeah, I think that's something that really needs to be dealt with, but like, you know, it's really difficult in terms of government support and all that side of it, so that's another story. But in terms of the music industry itself, I think just this awareness of, you know, mental health first aid, I wasn't aware of this, you know, this time last year, and then I saw the offer come through from the MMF and I thought this sounded amazing, what a great opportunity. And I just urge, you know, anyone in the industry, whether you work in the live side, management, you're a musician, it's just worth committing to the course. It's 12 hours, I believe. Was it 12 hours, Hannah? I think
Just doing maths isn't my strong point. 3, 6, 9, 12. Yeah.
Yes, it was, yeah, 12 hours split over 4 sessions. And yeah, it was just super informative. You're given some resources to take away with you, and it's something to reflect upon for when these issues do arise. So I just think, yeah, it's really important to educate yourself to then be able to, you know, focus on your well-being as well as others as well. It really does make you think. So yeah, I just think, you know, trying to do things in a small active way will then help with the bigger picture. So these opportunities, you should definitely seize them if you can, and working in the industry.
Thanks so much. I think we've kind of run out of time, so I wanted to say thank you to all of you, and I hope that this has been a really positive conversation for everyone who engages with XpoNorth, and I hope that you all have happy and healthy XpoNorth experiences. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.